Welcome back. Barriers in strategy, budget, and culture are the three biggest obstacles Lloyd Austin has to overcome as defense secretary, according to my next guest. Austin needs three things to overcome them and succeed as SecDef. Harlan Ullman is chair at the Killowen Group. His most recent book is Anatomy of Failure. He's writing about the new defense secretary in the Hill. Harlan, welcome. It's great to see you as always. You write in this piece, the department is wedded to the 2018 National Defense Strategy. What latitude does the new administration have in constructing the next NDS, do you think?
The issue isn't latitude, it's time. As you know, Francis, I believe that the current great power competition is fundamentally flawed for several reasons. The intent is to compete, deter, and defeat China or Russia if war comes. But nowhere has that been specifically defined as what competition means. It's more than just having freedom of navigation operations. As far as deterring, what are we trying to deter? We're not deterring the Chinese with the Uyghurs. We're not deterring the Russians with active measures, with solar winds, or with imprisoning Alexander Navalny. And defeat, as Secretary of Defense Bob Gates once said, any secretary who becomes engaged in a land war in Asia needs his or her head examined. And so, unfortunately, Secretary Austin has to deal with the old strategy while a new one is being constructed. The old strategy, in my judgment, is not affordable or executable. Regarding the budget's not going to grow. As former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Joe Dunford, said, at least 3 to 5% annual real growth is needed just to sustain the current force. The Defense Business Board believes is actually 5 to 7%. So even at fixed budgets, we're still going to be losing an awful lot of military capability. And finally, in terms of culture, civilian control of the military is a huge issue. Over the past 11 years, we've had 11 different secretaries, 7 secretaries and 4 acting secretaries. And so the military has taken, understandably, a larger role simply because of the absence of leadership. And so re-exerting civilian control, as well as dealing with sexual harassment. Indeed, if you listen to the Austin hearings or the hearings for Kathleen Hicks yesterday, one of the major issues was sexual harassment. We're dealing with right-wing white supremacy. And on top of that, the department has been directed by the president, I think rightly, to make dealing with COVID-19 a #1 priority. So these are huge obstacles for this new secretary to deal with. We got to put in place a strategy. How long will that take? The budget is going to cause real cuts. And not only do we have to reimpose civilian control of the military, namely on the service secretary side, but we also have to deal with sexual harassment and white supremacism, as well as with COVID-19. And these are huge obstacles, and it'd be hard-pressed to think of a former secretary, probably not since George Marshall, who took over in the middle of the Korean War, who was facing this extent of challenge.
You suggest 3 things for Secretary Austin to succeed. Ruthlessly challenging, as you put it, the national defense strategy, and you've outlined briefly why you think that's important. Ensuring that nominees for service secretaries, you write, not only understand the need for civilian control, but each must have the capacity to fill that need. And third, complete congressional support. I want to start with the second one in the time that we have remaining, because I think the word I want your comment on the most is that word capacity. What capacity should the service secretaries have in order to be successful so that Secretary Austin is successful, Harlan?
They've got to be extremely competent. They've got to be extremely tough. And they've got to realize that under Title 10 of the law, it is the service secretary who's responsible for organizing, training, and equipping, not the military. This is not a partnership. We've got to work very closely with the military, but the service secretary has to be in charge. And if I could name one who really filled that bill 40 years ago, it was John Lehman. We need a series of John Lehmans, in my judgment, for Navy, Air Force, and Army.
Are they out there, Harlan?
They are. The question is, who wants to work for the government? Not only is the pay bad, but the whole process of confirmation is very difficult. And given today's social media, everybody's going to be subjected to all sorts of attack, especially when you're trying to make cuts and making tough decisions. So getting people to serve is a very, very difficult deal. But yes, they are out there.
The third item that you mentioned, that you list in this piece, complete congressional support. What does that look like, and how far away have previous administrations been from having it?
They've been hugely far away. I mean, the Department of Defense, certainly over the last decade, and certainly under Donald Trump, has been very remote. Secretary Austin should be having some meal, lunch or dinner or breakfast, with the chairman of the Armed Services Committees of both houses. That's essential. They've got to be wedded. Now, they're going to have disagreements, but the more openness and transparency between the Armed Services Committee and the Secretary of Defense, the more important that will be. Finally, that's going to be a tough issue because White Houses want to exert control and they don't want to have a Secretary of Defense too much on his own. So joining those meetings could be the National Security Advisor or somebody from the House, from the White House. But we need to have far closer integration between the Hill because budgets are not going to support the current strategy. I don't know that they're going to support the future strategy. This is really essential.
We have about 30 seconds left. When Richard Spencer was on this program a number of years back, he talked about breakfasts among him, Secretary Wilson, and Secretary Esper when he was still Army Secretary.
Yeah.
Are those breakfasts a good idea, Harlan?
Absolutely. The services have got to work together. We cannot have the stovepiping. What's happened over the last 4 or 5 years, services in many ways have become collusive. As long as you support my program, I'll support yours. We don't have the budget to go around. There are going to be tough cuts. If we're going to grow the Navy, it means we're going to have to shrink the Air Force or the Army or vice versa. And so collaboration, and more than collaboration, there's got to be complete integration between and among the services, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Harlan Ullman, great insight as always. Thank you very much.
Quite welcome, Francis.